We have betrayal, we have a marriage falling apart, we have a missing woman, and we have a criminal enterprise that is slowly but surely closing in on itself. So grab your tea, get comfortable, and let's break down everything that happened in today's episode, scene by scene. Let's start where we left off. Last week the whole community was shaken to its core when it was revealed that Shobain and his associate Shobain had been running an illegal organ trafficking operation right under everyone's noses. People who trusted these men, people who saw Shobain as an upstanding doctor and a pillar of the community, are now waking up to the horrifying truth. And today's episode wastes absolutely no time reminding us just how deep this rabbit hole goes. We open on Shobain and Shobain, both still reeling from the exposure of their crimes. What's interesting is how differently these two men are handling the pressure. Shobain, who has always come across as the more calculating of the pair, is trying to keep his composure, while Shobain looks like a man who is genuinely starting to crack under the weight of his own choices. And can you blame him? This isn't some small infraction. This is human organ harvesting. This is the kind of crime that doesn't just end a career, it ends a life as most people know it. One thing I have to point out, because so many of you have been asking about it in the comments, was Shobain ever really forced into this scheme, or did he choose it? Today's episode makes it pretty clear. There's a pointed conversation where it said, in no uncertain terms, that Shobain was not forced into anything. He was not some innocent bystander dragged into a crime ring against his will. He walked in with his eyes open because, quite frankly, the money was good, and the lifestyle that came with it was even better. That distinction matters a lot going forward, because it tells us that whatever sympathy the audience might have had for Shobain is going to be tested hard in the coming weeks. Now let's talk about the moment that had my group chat absolutely exploding, Nkobo's visit to Shobain. At first, when Nkobo shows up, it looks like she might actually be there to support her husband. There's a brief moment where it seems like she's even willing to help him find a lawyer, and for a second you think, okay, maybe she's standing by her man through this storm. But no. That is not why she came. Nkobo sits Shobain down and tells him, plainly, that she is divorcing him. No shouting, no dramatic screaming match, just a calm, resolute declaration that their marriage is over. And honestly, good for her. This man dragged his family's name through unimaginable scandal, and Nkobo is not interested in going down with that ship. If you were rooting for her to finally stand up for herself, this was your moment. She is done being associated with a man who traffics in human suffering for profit. What I love about this scene is how it's shot. There's no music swelling in the background, no theatrics. It's just two people at a table, and the silence between them says more than any dialogue could. Shobain doesn't even really fight her on it. It's like he already knew this day was coming. Later in the episode we see that both Shobain and Shobain have been released on bail. Now, before you start shouting at your screen, remember, bail doesn't mean innocent, it just means the case is still being built. But it does raise the stakes, because now these two men are walking free while the investigation into Zethu's disappearance is still very much active. We get a glimpse of who actually paid for their bail, and it's not a surprise to anyone who has been paying attention to how deep this operation runs. There are people protecting Shobain and Shobain, people with resources, which tells us this isn't just a two-man crime ring. There's a whole network here, and today's episode is really the first time we start to feel the true scale of it. Can we talk about Matron for a second? Because her storyline this episode broke my heart a little. We're reminded, through a flashback-style sequence, of just how close Matron used to be with Shobain's family. She used to spoil him, she thought incredibly highly of him, and there was even a point where she wanted her own daughter to date him. That's how much trust this family had built in the community. And now, watching Matron grapple with the reality that the young man she once adored is a criminal, that's genuinely painful to watch. There's a moment where Matron, overwhelmed by everything that's happened, tells Shobain he needs to leave her house. It's a small scene, but it hits hard, because it represents the community turning its back on him. The people who once opened their doors to him now want nothing to do with him. When even Matron, someone who loved him like family, pushes him away, you realize just how far Shobain has fallen. Desperate and with nowhere else to go, Shobain ends up trying to seek shelter at Schwabi's house. Which, honestly, is a bit ironic given everything Schwabi's own household is going through with the looming divorce. Two disgraced men, both losing everything, now stuck under one roof because nobody else will have them. It's almost poetic in a bleak sort of way. Now let's get into the heart of today's episode, the search for Zethu. As most of you know, Zethu has been missing since she got too close to uncovering the truth about the organ trafficking operation. Today, we finally see just how far Schwabi is willing to go to find her, and not necessarily for good reasons. There's a tense sequence where Schwabi teams up with Onkobo, of all people, to search for Zethu. Yes, you read that right, even in the middle of divorcing him, Onkobo still gets pulled into helping look for her missing friend. It's a complicated dynamic, because Onkobo clearly still cares about doing the right thing, even if she wants nothing more to do with her husband personally. We also see the community rally in their own way. Flyers go up. There are appeals at the hospital where Zethu worked, with staff and colleagues pleading for anyone with information to come forward. It's a powerful reminder of how respected Zethu is in this community. She's not just some random missing person, she's a doctor, someone who has spent her career helping people. The idea that someone so devoted to healing others could be silenced by men who are literally stealing organs for profit is the kind of gut-punch irony that this show does so well. Here's where things get really juicy. Onkobo receives a text message from Schwabi's phone. The message essentially tells her that Zethu is somewhere safe for now, but that she needs to stay hidden, or be kept hidden, a little while longer. Naturally, Onkobo is not about to let this slide. She confronts Shobain directly and asks him point blank where her sister figure is. Shobain, in classic denial fashion, claims he doesn't know anything and doesn't even really know who Schwabi has been in contact with regarding Zethu. But Onkobo isn't buying it, and honestly, neither are we. The show does a great job here of building suspicion around that phone. We learn that the message came from a device that Zethu herself would never willingly give up. Zethu is not the type of woman to just hand over her phone to anyone, which strongly suggests that whoever sent that message either took the phone from her by force, or is using it to manipulate the people looking for her. It's a chilling detail, and it tells us this situation with Zethu might be far more dangerous than anyone initially realized. The firearm incident. If you thought this episode couldn't get any more intense, wait until you hear about the confrontation with law enforcement. In one of the episode's most dramatic moments, we see a firearm pulled on a police officer. Let that sink in for a second. Pulling a weapon on an officer of the law is an entirely different level of criminal offense, separate from the organ trafficking charges already on the table. This single act could be the thing that changes everything for our central criminals. Up until now, there's been this lingering possibility, at least in some viewers' minds, that Shobain and Schwabi might somehow talk their way out of serious jail time, or that a clever lawyer might find loopholes. But brandishing a weapon against police? That's the kind of charge that doesn't get negotiated away easily. It's the kind of charge that guarantees prison time, regardless of how good your lawyer is. Viewers in the comments have been going back and forth about whether Shobain will actually end up behind bars, or whether the writers are setting up some last-minute twist where he walks free. After today's episode, I have to say, the walls are closing in fast. Between the trafficking charges, the missing persons case, and now this firearm incident, it is getting harder and harder to see a version of the story where Shobain escapes justice. There's a smaller, quieter subplot running through this episode about what Shobain genuinely stands to lose. Beyond prison, beyond the community's judgment, there's real discussion about him potentially losing his medical license entirely. For a man who built his entire identity and his entire income around being a respected doctor, that loss might almost feel as devastating as prison itself. It's worth remembering that Shobain didn't get into this scheme because he was struggling financially. He got into it because he had already tasted a certain lifestyle, and once you get used to that kind of comfort, apparently it's very hard to go back to an ordinary life. That's basically confirmed in the episode when it said outright that Shobain is used to money, used to the soft life, and that going back to a normal existence is proving incredibly hard for him. It's a small but important character detail, because it explains his motivation far better than simple greed ever could. This is a man who was addicted to a certain standard of living, and that addiction is what led him down this path in the first place. The episode also does something clever with its structure. It gives us flashes of what Zethu herself was doing in the lead up to her disappearance. We see her traveling, determined and fearless, trying to dig up more information about the scale of this organ trafficking operation. In one particularly striking scene, she travels to interview a doctor who has already been arrested in connection with a similar scheme, hoping to learn just how long this kind of criminal activity has been happening in the region, and how far the network stretches. What she finds is honestly terrifying. This isn't some small, isolated operation run by two desperate men. It appears to be part of something that has been going on for years, with multiple doctors and facilitators involved across different areas. Zethu starts to realize that Shobain and Shobain are just two pieces of a much larger, much more organized criminal machine. That revelation is huge for the overall story, because it means that even if Shobain and Shobain go down, the operation itself might not actually stop. There could be other doctors, other clients, other people out there still profiting from this horrific trade. This is where the show really elevates itself from a simple crime drama into something with real social commentary. It's forcing viewers to confront the idea that organized crime like this doesn't just live in the shadows of one small community, it can be systemic, embedded, and protected by people with money and influence. When confronted directly, Shobain refuses to confess to anything. He denies his involvement outright, even in the face of mounting evidence. It's a frustrating but realistic portrayal of how these situations often play out. The person at the center of the scandal simply refuses to break, hoping that a lack of hard evidence will be enough to protect him. Meanwhile, there's an ominous suggestion that the endgame for Shobain and Shobain might not be a courtroom at all. There's real fear building among the characters, and honestly, among us as viewers, that Zethu might be in far graver danger than a simple kidnapping. The show hints strongly that these men see her as a direct threat to everything they've built, someone who knows too much and has already started digging into evidence that could put them away for good. When someone becomes that much of a liability to a criminal operation, history, both in fiction and in real life, tells us that things can turn deadly very quickly. It's genuinely unsettling to think that the operating table Zethu once used to save lives as a doctor could become the very place where her own story ends, at the hands of the men she was trying to expose. One of the more nuanced things this episode does is show us the cracks forming within Shobain and Shobain's own partnership. So far, their entire relationship has been driven by money and nothing else. There's no real loyalty here, no genuine friendship, just a transactional bond built on greed. And now that things aren't working out the way they planned, we start to see hints of tension between the two of them. Interestingly, despite everything, there does seem to be a genuine soft spot that Shobain has for Zethu specifically. It's subtle, but it's there, a flicker of guilt, or maybe even affection, whenever her name comes up. It raises an interesting question for the weeks ahead. Will that soft spot be enough to make Shobain turn on Shobain, or even help Zethu, before it's too late? Or will greed and self-preservation win out in the end, the way it always has for him so far? We also see Shobain pushing back hard whenever Onkobo or anyone else gets too close